Today I want to talk about how we can choose the RPG for our next campaign. How do we sift through all the options from rule systems and settings, stories we could tell? How do we look at all of that and decide on what to go with? And how do we make this process helpful so that our next campaign is more successful? My recent videos have been all about the Dungeon Master's Guide, and now that I'm done with that series, I want to come back to a series I started on launching campaigns. So if you have checked out the video, and you can click on the link here if you haven't, I started with the idea of a new campaign. How do we envision this campaign? We can do that by when we run a campaign, we finish our previous campaign with a to-do list. So we run a campaign, we do a to-do list. This tells us what we're looking for in the next campaign. And if you haven't seen that video, again, check it out. That's the foundation that I'm launching off for this whole series. So today I want to go from that topic to choosing the RPG for your next campaign. And you can find this on my blog at alphastream.org. And I'm going to follow on those concepts here and review some of that content while adding to it. So the reason for this post comes actually from my own experiences. I'm very lucky to have a group that includes both new players that I've been playing with for many years and a bunch of folks that I've added recently. And I actually have a few more players than I would normally sit at the table. So that gives us the opportunity to talk about possible games we want to play and choose who is available and who wants to sit down and do a particular campaign. And we have the latitude. I'm fortunate in that my players have tons and tons of interest areas. So in fact, recently we put together a survey to see what we might want to play. And we had tons of games. We had 17 games that we immediately threw on the list, 17 different RPGs and campaigns that we then looked at. And I came up with that based on this process that we're going to talk about today. And so I'm going to mix between my advice on the blog and my recent experiences. Okay, so the point of this exercise is to, at the end of it, say, hey, I've gone through all my choices and I've come up with the RPG campaign I want to run. But also, the point of this is to have the process lend itself to ending up making a smart choice with a great campaign that we will really enjoy running. And that's because we can be easily swayed by something we see, right? We get a Kickstarter in the mail, some crowdfunding thing that shows up. We go like, let's run this. But maybe that campaign's a little bit like the last one we ran, right? Or we get excited by the latest D&D book, but we're also trying to think about that last one we wanted to run. And so it can be quite confusing, right? So many options, so little time. What will we really enjoy running? And what will our players enjoy? So the first thing we can do is go back to that video I talked about in that previous blog post about our to-do list, right? If we ended our campaign on a to-do list, we can review it and we'll see, hey, last time I said I want to try more exploration systems. Or maybe I said, I really want the players to have a stake in some corner of the world, something they own and develop in addition to the main storyline. And so I want to flesh that out in concepts. Or I've really enjoyed playing fantasy. I want to do sci-fi now, right? Or something that's darker in tone or lighter in tone. And so as we go through that to-do list, we'll get both these broad ideas around the kind of campaign we want, and also specific ideas like, hey, I need to put a froghemoth in a swamp and have like really neat tentacles swirling out and attacking. We can run any kind of campaign and actually say, I'm going to run a Star Wars campaign and I'm going to take that froghemoth idea and use it, right? So both the concrete and the broad from our to-do list can be very helpful. Reading over that list can be our first step, assuming we just finished a campaign, and that can fill us with a lot of different ideas that we have. In my case, I had a lot of things on my list, both specific and broad, and that lent itself to thinking about the kinds of things that I want to do. Like one that is on my list these days is exploration and also random encounters. I've been thinking about those subjects a lot. They come up a lot in our Discord. They come up a lot from Patreon supporters. And so I've been thinking about those concepts and I'd like to play with them more design-wise. Seeing the new DMG Bastion system, which you've probably seen me review in videos here, that's been interesting. And I've previously developed my own version of that in Acquisitions Incorporated makes me want to develop even yet another version that I use and play that might be my own system that I could perhaps share with others. So all those become interest areas, and that's on my to-do list. Beyond that to-do list, we can look at all of the RPGs we have, right? That's an easy way to cut things down to say, okay, what do I want to run? And maybe it's simple for you because you just say, hey, it's just Dungeons and Dragons, or it's just Shadow Dark, or it's just whatever it might be, right? Knights, Black Agents, Deadlands. Or you might be like me and have an enormous list of games that I want to run. I want to do 13th Age and Knights, Black Agents, and I want to do Aliens and Coriolis, and I've got that Invisible Sun box set I should really go through, and Daggerheart's coming, and a 13th Age 2E is coming, and Draw Steel, and so my list is enormous. And then there are things that I want to do as one-shots, and that's kind of easy because I can put those into the bucket of one-shots. Like, I'd love to do more Alien one-shot games or three-shot, short series that I don't have to worry about as a full campaign. So I can take that list of RPGs and I can kind of say, okay, here are the list of RPGs that I really want to run a cool, decently long campaign with, right? And then I can go through and I can think about settings as well, because some RPGs have multiple settings. So even if you say, all I play is D&D Teos, that's all I care about, so I'm done with choosing RPGs. Okay, but is it Spelljammer? Is it, do you want to take the Giants book and run through all kinds of a whole Giants series, maybe taking some of what's in Storm King's Thunder and, just constant, the number of settings that are out these days, the number of possibilities, both 5e and previous editions, there's just so much to do, right? From Dark Sun to Dragonlance and just on, and then making your own setting, right? And when it comes to our own setting, we could have all kinds of ideas. Are we doing with like a clockwork steampunk? Are we doing a mystery solving organization, an Eberron style campaign with technology and magic and sort of noir setting? So, that idea of the setting can be a lot. And even within an RPG that has a single kind of given setting, there are a lot of dials and options for that setting. So for example, if I'm looking at Deadlands, which is a Weird West RPG, I can choose how much I want to go into the Western aspect, usually pretty heavy, but I could dial down the fear or dial it up depending on how much of a horror experience I want, right? And how much clockwork and sort of weird stuff there is also something that I can easily control while having an accurate Deadlands experience. When I'm thinking about concepts rather than specific RPGs like sci-fi, there's a huge difference between a Coriolis campaign, an Alien campaign, and something like a Star Wars campaign, right? Those are very different experiences and types of games. Coriolis is big, writ large sci-fi, or like big, huge concepts where you're thinking about what it means to go out into the stars and the things that you're experiencing. Aliens is this gritty, personal horror, right? You don't deal with the bigger stuff. You suffer from the right here, right now kind of stuff. And the bigger things are concepts you don't even have the time to worry about. When we're playing something like Star Wars, it's a little in the middle, right? And it's more about rebellion and concepts like that, empire, tyranny in a space setting, and the coolness of visiting these new worlds as you deal with those kinds of things. You could also run things like a bounty hunter campaign and so on, but it's still different than that Coriolis big sci-fi experience, right? So this combination of looking at the RPGs and the settings is a nice initial cut we can do to get really excited about what we like. And a real simple thing is just throw these into some kind of document and start sorting them, right? What are my favorite RPGs? For those RPGs, what are my favorite settings? And kind of move them up and down loosely to figure out what you kind of like from that, right? As we group and compare these options, we can find some similarity as well, right? So we might say, hey, I've got 3 sci-fi options I really like here. Do I feel like that high, broad science that I talked about with Coriolis? Or do I feel like this sort of rebellion, bounty hunter kind of concept, right? Am I so inspired by Andor that that's the kind of campaign I'm running? Or do I want something that is that broader concept, right? That broader sci-fi concept. So that becomes kind of easier to deal with as we break that down. We might have several spy games or fantasy games that we're looking at, and we can choose between them, right? I've got D&D, I've got 13th Age, I've got Daggerheart, I have Draw Steel, I have Shadow Dark, and I can think about what differentiates those and kind of sort them according to what I like, right? If I really love horror, I could also look at it as the genre and the difference between running Aliens or Call of Cthulhu. And that can also help me sort it out to say, I love the space horror more than I love the gothic type horror, the Victorian type horror. This idea of kind of wandering around with these kinds of elements intruding into something like a 1920s era, right? And the pulp angle of Call of Cthulhu, that could all be really interesting. Certain RPGs will lend themselves more or less along the lines of a particular campaign that you want to run. So we can think about that as well. Dragonlance is perfect for something where there's war occurring across the landscape. There is heroism. The gods have faded. Ancient history is coming back. And the way that the setting is built lends itself to telling those stories better than some other setting we might use, right? Spelljammer naturally lends itself to big travel, to moving from one world to another and one system to another, even into the astral plane. So if we like that aspect, then that works well. If that isn't exciting to us, then maybe that isn't the setting for us, right? I could think about in a 13th Age campaign, how leaning into your factions is a natural thing for 13th Age, because 13th Age has these icons and a system behind them that really makes it great to run a faction-driven campaign that's a little more improvisational, where we can say, well, what faction is which icons are active in the city right now? Which ones heard what you're up to and react to it, right? We can be more improvisational with that because the game is written that way. We could also look at something about like the length of the campaigns, right? Alien, we know that we may have a lot of deaths, and that may be, even if we choose between the mode where you're getting churned through and the one that's a little longer, you have a longer campaign with a game like Coriolis than you probably will with Aliens, and so that may work out that way to be a little better. Some role-playing games are going to have options, like Night's Black Agents has 4 different modes of play. So you can say, oh, we are agents who've been burned by organizations, and so we're out on our own trying to figure things out. Or we are focused on monster hunting with the support of our agencies. Those are all different types of campaigns. You can have sort of spy versus spy. So depending on the types of stories you have, the game might lean into it and help create that experience. The D&D campaign, you can choose to have low level, mid level, high, in addition to these different setting options. But there's some things that a particular RPG might not lend itself well to do, right? Night's Black Agents, it can be used to just create a pure spy story, but it leans towards that horror area. And probably if you just want to do spy, a different game might be better. With an RPG like Star Wars, we could decide whether we want to do something like everybody's a Jedi or nobody's a Jedi, or we're all Ewoks, right? That kind of thinking through the campaign options can really change the way that an RPG appeals to you. So as I go through this process, right, and I look at my list of RPGs, my list of settings, the reasons why I have it, I group them and think about, okay, here are all the ones that are sci-fi. Here's what wins out of those. Here are the things that are horror or spy or modern. And as you break that apart, you can end up having some clarity from that process. And one of the great questions is whether this choice of what to run is a GM choice, or is it a player choice, or both? I think both options are possible. First and foremost, you as a DM, as a GM, you want to be excited about the campaign. This should be, maybe even must be, a campaign that you really, really want to run, because that will create the most energy. So when I come up with a list of RPGs I want to play, these are all things I want to play. If I'm not really super excited about it, as I'm ranking these, I will remove that from the list, right? Now, what I will then do, because I know me, I'm going to end up with a bunch of things I want to run. Maybe you have a list of 3 things and you can just choose one and off you go. But for me, as I said, I end up with something like 17, and hearing my friends and their excitement, I'll throw it on there. And when I create a survey to bring in my players into it, I'm perfectly fine with them telling me what they like the most, right? So we put up this survey, and I was pretty excited to run the One Ring, even though I'm not a big Lord of the Rings fan in terms of something that I would want to create an RPG experience around. I love the rules and I really want to learn from them more. So that's kind of what I was leaning to the most. But the players were really excited about Deadlands, and we just had finished running Deadlands. So it's very easy for me to continue and create a medium-sized campaign that would have a lot of fun building on the experience we just had. So that became something that I'm super excited about, right? There's no doubt in my mind. I'm like, yes, let's do this Deadlands campaign, which is what I'm choosing next, with the idea that, and after that, one of the things I'm really thinking about is that One Ring campaign. But I'm also really excited about other things, right? Like I would like to do my own version of the Dragonlance story and really give people that Dragonlance experience. That could be a ton of fun. I'd love to run all kinds of other campaigns like Coriolis. And if in your group, your players get excited, that's awesome too, right? So one of the things is if we just choose what we want to run, we may cut off players from saying, actually, I want to run that. And that can be an additional benefit that I've really seen in my group, right? So putting this list together, and one of the things we asked in the survey was, who wants to run this? And there were some surprising results, and then some others that I knew just from talking to the players. But I have a lot of DMs in my group, and they were excited to run various campaigns. And so as much as I was excited by Coriolis, having my friend talk about how they want to run Coriolis, I'm really glad to seed that space. There's a lot I can run, and having that system run by someone else would be awesome. I would love to play in a Coriolis campaign. So that's one of the things that we'll probably run maybe after Deadlands with someone else DMing it. So this idea of bringing your players into it can be a nice way to get them to have some stake in it, express their interests, and give you a little bit of a break so you can meanwhile be thinking through your next campaign that you're going to run while you play theirs. So I'm a fan in general of bringing the players into it at some level, even if all you do is say, hey, I have these 2 choices. Which would you prefer? I think that can be really cool. When you share things with players, if you have particular aspects that you want, then say that, right? If it's D&D, but this setting, that makes more sense. If you only want to run Spelljammer, well, make sure that that's obvious. Or you want to run Night's Back Agents, but tone down the horror, let them know that, so that's part of their choosing, so that they don't choose a thing because they want a different experience from it, right? One last aspect to consider is the length of the campaign. So different RPGs will lend themselves to shorter or longer stories overall, but they will also inspire in you a particular length as well. You may think to yourself, I want to run this RPG, but just for a certain amount of space, right? Like, while I love reading the alien books about setting up colonies and exploring the stars, I have trouble thinking of myself running a very long aliens campaign. Some of the other people in my group, they like that concept. But for me, I'm really thinking about running a shorter campaign if I choose the alien RPG as my choice. When I think about something like Dungeons and Dragons, I've been able to run 2-year or longer campaigns because I put so much into those campaigns and just keep adding and creating. And so if I allow myself, if I want to, I can have a tremendously long D&D campaign. Something like Night's Black Agents or Coriolis might be medium in between, right? So it really depends on the game and the ideas that I have behind it. With this Deadlands campaign, I'm thinking a little bit more towards medium size, but maybe if we're having a lot of fun, I might add to it and expand upon it. But we'll see, right? We'll see how it goes and what I can do with it. And as I start thinking through those campaign options, I think about, well, if we go with this campaign, here's the kind of length I'll have, and then I can tailor it a bit as we go, right? I ran Tomb of Annihilation. We played 2 years, and at the end of it, the players were willing to go further. I wasn't, I was like, no, this is great. I think this is a wonderful experience, even though we could go and bring in some of the adventures that are out there on the DMs Guild and expand that experience, I'm really happy what this is, and my level of effort and kind of the energy I'd put into it, I was ready for a shift. And so those are all important things to recognize. If you ran there's probably some RPG or setting that when you think about it, you think to yourself, I'll do that, but for a few months, right? And that's totally fine. So that can be a final piece to think about as you're planning the kind of RPG you want to run. So I hope this video has been helpful on how you can go through a process to pick your next RPG. Next time, we're going to look at how that RPG can be one you've never ever played before. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please share it with others, give it the thumbs up, subscribe to these, and if you're so inclined, come join me on my Patreon and be part of the cool community that we've got there. Really appreciate everybody who makes these videos possible. I'll see you next time.